from last week. Be in lesson chapter 8, I think, starting at question 10 is where we left off last time. It says, why did David not kill Saul in the cave of En-gedi? Why was it that he didn't have opportunity? He was God's anointed king, and he would not raise his hand against God's anointed. Shows the respect that we ought to have for those that are established by God in their office. Verse 11 says, what did David do to show Saul that he had opportunity to kill him? Cut off the edge of his robe. Verse 12 says, who agitated Saul's anger against David? According to verse 9. Words from men. They have different men that had stirred him up against David. And how is David's conduct an example for Christians in how to handle personal offense? Anybody want to add anything there? Overcome evil with good. Don't take your own revenge. Leave room for the wrath of God. That's what the book of Romans teaches us to do in chapter 12. As far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. We're to do good and not evil to anyone. And David is going to leave things up to God to worry about revenge and punishing Saul. It says, what impact did David's conduct have on Saul? He wept, and then he confessed his sin and confessed that David was more righteous than he. And we're told that when you do good to those that are your enemies, it pours burning coals upon their head and brings shame on them, that they might lead them to repentance. At least temporarily, it slowed Saul down as far as his pursuit of David. What did Saul recognize about David's future? He would one day be the king. What covenant did he make with David? He wouldn't harm his descendants. And 17, what did we learn about Samuel's reception in Israel from his death? What was it? All the people mourned. So he was highly respected when they buried him. They all mourned for him. 18 says, describe the character of Nabal, I should say, and Abigail. How is Nabal described in chapter 25? Harsh, evil, wicked, foolish, arrogant. All those words pretty well fit him. And Abigail, what are some of the things said about her? So she was wise and prudent. She's humble, and she is beautiful on the outside as well. Says, why did David expect Nabal to give him goods as at the sheep shearing? Why would he expect his men to be given those gifts? He'd been protecting him like a wall, and no harm had ever come to any of his sheep or anything. So David had been serving him as a protector. Okay. What did Nabal say about David? He insulted him. What was involved in the insult? Who is David? He's a nobody. He's a runaway servant, like a lot of other runaway servants. Is all David is. So insults him. Well, this is where, of course, Abigail comes into the story. Servants come to her and tell her about the things that happened when David's men came, and that all of the house is going to be destroyed if she doesn't do something. She's a prudent, wise person in the family, nobody can talk to Nabal. He's one of those people that none of the servants can talk to and get a hearing with. So she's sort of the one that keeps everything together, evidently. So they go to her, and she immediately puts together an offering and gifts to send to David. She comes separately behind the gifts that are brought, is where we left off last time, and we're having let's see. I can start reading and kind of catch up on the slides here. We have the burial of Samuel here at the first of the chapter. David's down in the wilderness of Maon in southern Judah at this particular time. His servants are shamefully treated by Naboth because he doesn't respect David or doesn't return all of the good that David has done to him by giving supplies to him for his men. So David gets 200 men to stay behind with the women and children. 400 men ready themselves for battle, and he's going to take revenge because of this reproach of his name and all on Nabal. And so the servants go to Abigail in verses 14 through 17. David saved their sheep and equipment. He was a wall to them. And Nabal is a worthless son of Belial, a worthless man that you can't talk to, and she needs to do something to save this situation. So she gets 200 loaves of bread, 2 full wineskins, 5 sheep already dressed, measures of parched wheat, 100 clusters of raisin, 200 fig cakes, and gifts are sent before her. And David did not intend to leave any male in the family alive. It says, now, David had said, surely in vain I have guarded all that this man has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missing of all that belonged to him, and he has returned me evil for good. So David is determined to bring his own revenge here. May God do so to the enemies of David and more also, if by morning I leave as much as one male of any who belong to him. So you can see David is totally outraged and loses his temper, loses his right thinking as far as letting God handle things. And this Nabal, he says, didn't appreciate the protection that he gave to him. It was in vain that he did good to this man. It's only going to end up with no result whatsoever because of his evil nature. He guarded him, watched over him, and preserved him, and this man has returned evil for good. Isn't that the kind of things our flesh tells us, that we can strike somebody and take our own revenge and pay them back? They did me, I did them nothing but good. Now they've done evil to me, and now I'm going to get them. That's the fleshly man talking, and we're all tempted by the same kind of things. When persecuting us or somebody does us wrong, that we want to strike out in some way or another. And we're supposed to be led by the Spirit, not by the flesh. But David is totally under the control of his flesh at this particular moment. It doesn't justify him in taking personal revenge. That belongs to God. That doesn't belong to us. It doesn't matter if somebody's done evil to us. We're not supposed to take our own revenge. And he's going to kill not just Nabal, he's going to kill every male in the house, he says. That's not right. That you're going to, not just punish Nabal, he's going to punish his servants, any male in the house. He's totally going overboard. And that's one of the things wrong with people taking personal revenge, is that we tend to overdo it. I mean, that's one of the problems with it. You're supposed to go to a judge who's going to handle it in a dispassionate way according to the law, fair. And when you just take it into your own hands, you end up having a whole village get slaughtered for something. It's going to happen unless God, in his kindness and providence for David, sends somebody to him to wake him up. And sometimes that's what any of us need. We have moments of weakness, and we need somebody to come talk to us. David did. He's a great man of faith. I know I could get out of control. Any of us could, and need somebody to come talk some sense to us. And Abigail's going to be the one to do so. Yes. Right. Well, this man is a Calebite, right? He's an Israelite. He's a member of the. You can't just go in and wipe out all of these other Israelites that are. I mean, they're all men of Judah. He's going to wipe out all the servants, everybody, all the children. David is going way overboard, and he's just mad. He's insulted. He's future king. Why are they? And when God gives a command to wipe people out, well, that's God's prerogative. It's not my prerogative to go. God wiped them out. I'll wipe them out. You know, we've got to be governed by what God's law is for us, about how we treat our fellow man. And so he doesn't. He's totally out of line here. But he's going to be shown by Abigail that that's the case. In verses 23 through 31, she presents a tremendous argument and shows great wisdom and tact in the way that she gets David to see that he's not following all of these higher principles that she knows that he believes in, right? You're not following, and think about all that's going to happen in the future for you if you don't do evil. God's going to make you king, and you're going to look back on this with regret if you act out of hand now and do evil. Right? She uses all kinds of motives to get him to recognize that he shouldn't act like this and accept her gift. It says, when Abigail saw David, she hurried and dismounted from her donkey and fell on her face before David and bowed herself to the ground. And she fell on his feet and said, on me alone, my Lord, be the blame. And please let your maidservant speak to you and listen to the words which your maidservant. Please do not let my Lord pay attention to this worthless Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Name and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives, as your soul lives, since the Lord has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord be as Nabal. Now let this gift which your maidservant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who accompany my Lord. Please forgive the transgression of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil will not be found in you all your days. Shall anyone rise up to pursue you and to seek your life? Then the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will sling out as from the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord does for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and appoints you ruler over Israel, this will not cause grief or troubled heart to my Lord, both by having shed blood without cause, and by my Lord having avenged himself when the Lord deals well with my Lord. Then remember your maidservant. Oh, she comes and just throws herself on the ground in front of him, bows down in all humility before David, and is laying right on his feet and begins to say, please forgive me. She's the one that takes care of hospitality in the house, and she didn't know the young man came. And Nabal's a fool. He doesn't know anything. So forgive me that I wasn't there to take charge of this. Let all the blame be on me. And recognize if someone with some intelligence had been there, this wouldn't have happened. she says some pretty harsh things about her husband, but she's saving her husband's life, right? I mean, she is really saving the whole family. And everything she says about her husband's the truth. He's worthless. He's a drunk. He's no good. But she still is, in the family, and she's going to do what she can to save the family. And she says, I'll take the blame. And her husband, Nabal, he lives up to what people call him. He is a worthless person. So why should David commit this great evil over somebody of such little value? You ever think about things like that? Why should you ruin your soul and your reputation, the church's reputation, by taking revenge on somebody when they're of no account? Why would you do that? That's not wise. David needs to see the big picture. You're too important to go do this kind of thing and to drop down to this level and act like, a worldly person. And that's something we all need to ask ourselves. Don't commit such a sin because of him. And she's glad that David's been stopped. She sees herself as a person that is representing God. That he's come in and stopped David from making a big mistake by going and killing these people. You ever see that you're a messenger, a servant of God, when you go to try to make peace, or you try to stop someone from taking action they shouldn't take? Instead of sitting around and just thinking about it, if you would go to their house and you go try to talk to them and try to stop it before it happens, you'd be serving God, and they're acting in their soul's best interest to try to stop it. And she could see what was about to happen. She does everything she can to protect innocent blood from being shed. And so she intercedes here, and she says, God has restrained you. She calls the present that she's given to him a blessing from God, that he should look at it. That here's this, in spite of Nabal, you're getting the things that you need for your men, and you're getting this blessing. And then she asks him, forgive your maidservant. One of the rules on being forgiven that is important for all of us to know is to say, please forgive me. A lot of times people don't get forgiven because they don't ask. You have a fight with your wife, or a wife with her husband, and there's a problem, and nobody says, please forgive me. I was wrong, please forgive me, and get an answer, right? And then you can put it behind you and forget it because you forgave me, right? So we don't want to bring that up again. Let's go on from here, right? Well, that's what she says. Forgive your maidservant. I wasn't there. The gift wasn't given. You didn't get the respect you should have got from the house. But please forgive me. And David is going to have a great future. He needs to think about how things are going to be in the future if he does this evil deed and goes with this fleshly impulse and kills these people for his honor and takes his own revenge. Someday God's going to make him king because he's always fought the battles of the Lord, and God has protected him and kept him safe. And God will throw out all of his enemies, just like that stone that came out of his sling when he killed Goliath. All of the enemies of David are going to get treated that way. So think about what God's done for you, what he's going to do for you in the future, and don't do your hands now. So why go out and commit this deed? Take this revenge, and God will protect you. He's going to make you king someday. And wouldn't it be sad to have these thoughts going through your mind while you're sitting on the throne? I killed those innocent people in that house. Killed those servants and those little boys or whoever's in that house. I know there's things in my life I wish I could have had somebody tell me, don't do that, you'll regret it someday. Because we all have things we regret, don't we? You're laying awake at night, think about them. Yeah, I wish I had done that. I'd have been smarter the way I handled this or that. And none of us want that in our future while we're enjoying our good days. We got to have a conscience that bothers us in any way over the past. So as you think about these things, how's that for an appeal from a wise woman on how to try to head something off before it happens? She is a very prudent woman and wise. And that she foresees so much about David. Nabal says, who's David, right? She knows who David is, and she lives in the same house. So it shows how two different people can. She evidently had a lot of the same information that Nabal had, but look at the different conclusion. She says, he's the anointed, he's the future king, he's the one that does right, he fights for God. And Nabal says he's a nobody, he's just a runaway servant. Certainly, she's the one that's right. Anybody else have a thought there on Abigail? Well, the Lord intercedes for us, doesn't he? And it's sort of an example of that. And didn't Moses do the same thing for Israel? Blot me out of your book. Don't blot the people. And that's a noble thing, that you would try to save people from destruction and try to intercede for them. Even the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham prayed for them and tried to get as many up. If there was only 10, save them. So it is a noble thing to intercede for sinners and pray for sinners and pray for people and try to plead their case for another day, another opportunity. But certainly she's looking out best she can for her family and everybody connected with it. And it's not just Nabal; it's all of. She has, if they're children or servants' children, or I think there are a lot of people involved here than just her stupid husband that she's got. Everybody else is connected with it. And then verses 32 through 35, then David recognizes, he comes to the same conclusion. You've been sent by God. I was going to do this horrible thing, and you woke me. I can see now that's not the right thing to do. David said to Abigail, "Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed be your discernment. And blessed be you, who have kept me from this day from bloodshed and from avenging myself by my own hand. Nevertheless, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has restrained me from harming you, unless you had come quickly to meet me, surely there would not have been left to Nabal until the morning light as much as one male." So David received from her hand what she had brought him and said to her, "Go up to your house in peace. See, I have listened to you and granted your request." So David says, thanks be to God, that you came. God be praised and blessed, because there's such a woman as her that was sent out to talk to him. Because he surely would have done it. He doesn't have, I surely would have killed them all. There's no doubt about it. That's how mad he was. That's how certain he was he's going to do this. So he was restrained by her discernment, that she was able to understand this situation, understand God's will about revenge, about David's future, about how this was going to affect everybody if he did this thing. I mean, she really knew her Bible. She knew what kind of arguments and how to present it in a humble way. And it just shows how much can be done when a person really applies themselves and has some knowledge to go with it, that she stopped him from committing this great sin. And so he grants her request, he receives the gift, and he turns away from this personal revenge, dismisses her in peace. So, meanwhile, back at Nabal's house, Abigail's got to go back home and tell her husband what she did. But he's been partying. He would be just like the king of Babylon that was partying, the night that the Babylonians came and was killed. Same thing here. Nabal's as drunk as he can be. David would have wiped him out. He'd never known what was happening. He was in that state of mind. It says, then Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. And she did not tell him anything at all until the morning light. And that's pretty good advice. It's pretty hard to talk to a drunk. Any of us that have had the misfortune of being around drunkards and people in our family that are drunk, can't talk to somebody when they're drunk. It's like talking to the wall. They don't do any good. It says, but in the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became as a stone. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. So you can see, did David need to take his own revenge? How hard is it for God to take justice in hand to deal for his people what somebody deserves? It's no problem for God. I don't know if he had a heart attack when it says his heart became like stone. Some people think he had a stroke when he heard about this the next morning. And he lingered in it for 10 days, and then God struck him dead for good 10 days later. But it seems to carry with it at least what I was reading, he's like paralyzed or in a coma or something. That he's just struck in such a way that he's not able to do anything. Yeah. So his heart became like stone, or he was just struck down there, but not dead yet. So again, David didn't need to take revenge. He didn't have to go out and stand up for his proper respect and honor, and because he's David. And we don't either. That's the thing to learn from this. The New Testament teaches us the same thing. We don't have to go out and make sure everybody respects us, or we're going to punch you in the nose or whatever. That's what gang members do, and people in the hood. It's like, you dissed me and I'm going to shoot you or kill you or whatever. But we'll just go on. God will take care of it. He sees everything that happens. He's aware of who we are, whether the world recognizes it or not. And someday he's going to set things right. And many of us in life can look back at people that were disrespectful or persecuted us, and we see the consequence in their life of bad things that have happened to them because of that. And God's able to take care of these things. We don't have to worry about it. He's perfectly able to give justice out in this life, or if not in this life, then in the life to come. There's going to be justice. So we're left just to do good to people and trust God and his providence to take care of things. And here's an example where certainly he did that. Any other thoughts on Nabal here? Well, now that Abigail's single, David has this wise woman. He thinks that she would be somebody good to add to his household here. In verses 39 through 42, says, and David heard that Nabal was dead. He said, blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has also returned the evil doing of Nabal on his own head. So blessed be God. He is a just God. He did this without me raising a hand. And he has stood up for my honor and brought down this man's evil on himself. And then David sent a proposal to Abigail to take her as his wife. And when the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel, they spoke to her saying, David has sent us to you to take you as his wife. And she arose and bowed with her face to the ground and said, behold, your maidservant is a maid to wash the feet of my Lord's servants. And then Abigail quickly arose and rode on a donkey with her 5 maidens who attended her. And she followed the messengers of David and became his wife. So now David has another wife that we're told about. And then there'll be a list of another wife that he has. So he's certainly, she's a wise woman and got a lot of great qualities and all. But we know in the end, because he's not following God's order for marriage from the beginning, from creation, it was to be male and female, and you become one flesh, and that's what God intended. He didn't intend polygamy. So there's going to be evil consequences come from the polygamy. But in the Old Testament, God, because of the hardness of men's hearts and their immaturity, he overlooked this sin in the Old Testament times, but he never approved of it. He didn't like it. He knew it would bring evil on people. And eventually, of course, we learn by their evil consequences that were in their life and the teaching of Christ that this is not to be practiced, not in any way whatsoever in the New Covenant. But she talks about her humility, that she's to be his wife. 'Cause I'm just somebody to wash your servant's feet. That's certainly boy, if that's the attitude everybody had about their willingness to serve. That well, I'm not good enough to be your wife. I'm just a woman that is good enough to wash the feet of your servants. She does come to Marion, so she certainly expresses her humility and her willingness to do whatever for such a man as David. So she comes, and certainly she has a lot of wealth. And maybe I don't know if Nabal had male children. We don't ever read about it. Maybe all the property of Nabal went to David when he married her. I don't know. I mean, it could have been that was how he supported himself for the next few years. As part of the, Nabal wouldn't give him a little bit, and he ends up giving him everything, right, in the end, and even his wife, which was his most precious possession that he had. But we're told then about David's wives, and he's already beginning to multiply wives. It says David had also taken Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both became his wife. So he's got Ahinoam and Abigail, and his wife Michal was Saul's daughter that did help save him when he escaped. But Saul took her and gave her to another man. So he's going to get her back later. It's not going to work out well, but he's going to get her back from that man when he becomes king. It says now, Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was from Galim, which is a city up close to where Saul's capital is at. And so David begins to multiply wives. Of course, later he's going to have Bathsheba's going to be his wife, and others. And you're going to have all kinds of problems between his children from the different wives. It shows part of the problem with polygamy. There's going to be all this rivalry and murder and rape and stuff that goes on because of this. It's going to ruin the latter part of his life, all of this stuff. So he doesn't look like he's laying the seeds for all of that right now, but later it's going to bear its evil fruit. When something contrary to God's plan is going to cause trouble. God always gives laws out for our good. And having marriage between one man and one woman is the best for man and woman. And people substitute something else, there's going to be problems. The death of God's people are precious in his sight. We know that just as Samuel's death was precious to the people of Israel, certainly was to God as well. The words spoken with wisdom are as apples of gold, we're told in Proverbs. And certainly Abigail, speaking with discretion and wisdom, really is a great example of how to appeal to someone to do the right thing and not to commit evil. And she's described as discreet, or having discernment, and humble, and generous, and God-fearing, and knowledgeable, and fluent. She was a woman that was definitely an excellent woman, one of the best. So let's look then at, again, Saul's third pursuit of David is in chapter 26. You would think that after David has spared his life, that Saul would come to his senses, but it doesn't take long until he gets back and gets to thinking about his kingdom being taken over and all of that, and people slandering David and stirring him up in his evil spirit, and he's back doing the same thing again in chapter 26. Yes? I think it was just being hateful. I think when he fled and he left, and his daughter saved his life, and then she said he was going to kill me if I didn't help him. That was an insult to him that he gave his wife to somebody else. So then, let's see, verses 1 through 5 says, then the Zephites were back to these guys again. They're the ones that betrayed him before. They'll do it again. Came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, is not David hiding in the cave of Hachilah, which is by Jeshiman. And so David arose and went down to the wilderness of Seth, having with him 3,000 chosen men of Israel to search for David in the wilderness of Zeph. And Saul camped in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshiman, beside the road, and David was staying in the wilderness. And when he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness, David sent out spies, and he knew that Saul was definitely coming. And David then arose and came to the place where Saul had camped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. And Saul was lying in the circle of the camp, and the people were camped around him. So here we are again, same situation as before. The standing army of 3,000 men come out, and they're going to surround David there in the wilderness of Seth again. And scouts, spies are sent out. They locate the main army. David knows for sure that he's coming. He goes out, and Saul is sleeping right in the center of the camp. And David is going to sneak into the camp and stand right over the body of Saul this time. And with God's help, he's able to once again have opportunity to kill Saul. In verses 6 through 12, it says, "Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. And David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping inside the circle of the camp, and his spear stuck in the ground as to the head, at his head. And Abner and the people were lying around him. And Abishai said to David, Today God has delivered your enemy into your hand. Now therefore, please let me strike him with the spear to the ground with one stroke, and I will not strike him the second time. But David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be without guilt? And David also said, As the Lord lives, surely the Lord will strike him, or his day will come that he dies, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now please take the spear that is at his head and the jug of water, and let us go. And so David took the spear and the jug of water from beside Saul's head, and they went away. But no one saw or knew it, nor did any awaken, for they were all asleep, because a sound sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. So David goes in, sneaks into the camp with Abishai, Joab's brother. He is another one of David's mighty men that is going to be at his side all the way through his life. It's his cousin, it's his sister's son is Joab, and Abishai and Hazael, those three brothers, all come from Zeruiah, which was David's sister. So they're the ones that go with him. He goes into the camp with him, and they see Saul laying there right in the middle of the camp. He says, Let me strike him, because I'll kill him with one stroke. I won't have to hit him a second time. And I'm sure Abishai, he is a mighty warrior. He's going to do all kinds of great things. That he would have killed Saul, and that would have been it. With one shot, there wouldn't have been any doubt. But David says, No, I cannot raise my hand against the Lord's anointed. I'm not going to take things into my own hands. I'm going to leave it to God's providence to remove him from the throne, and God will take care of him. He'll fall and die some other way, but it will be by my hand. And we know it's going to happen later. He's going to go into battle. That's how he's going to die. He's going to die at the hands of the Philistines. Actually, by his own hand. In the end, he killed himself. But so he again shows the same thing. You think this story sounds like the one we heard already, where he cut the thing off. But do things happen more than once in life sometimes? They do. They happen. Things happen twice a lot of times. There was 2 battles of Bull Run. Do you know that? Civil War. Same place, same side won. It was a rout. And you wouldn't think so, but it happened. First battle of Bull Run, second battle of Bull Run. Stuff like that happens all the time in history. Sometimes people see something like this, they say, oh, well, This is like the same story told different ways, and two different editors like put these two stories in there. We don't have to decide that. Things that are a lot alike happen in life a lot of times the same way. And history's full of things like this. And this, he tried to pin David to the wall with a spear twice, and David refused to kill him twice. And some of the same players were involved in both accounts, in both events. And David again, after he's got a ravine between him and Saul, he's going to call out and rebuke Abner for allowing him to come right into the camp when he's the general of the army and stand right over the Lord's anointed and take away his spear. So we're told in verse 13, then David crossed over to the other side and stood on top of the mountain at a distance with a large area between them. And David called to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, will you not answer, Abner? And then Abner replied, who are you? Who calls to the king? So David said to Abner, are you not a man? And who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came to destroy the king your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, all of you must suffer. All of you must surely die, because you have not guarded your Lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is and the jug of water that was at his head. David shouts at him and mocks him. David used to be a commander in the army. He knows what all the rules are. You're to guard the king. You can't fall asleep on watch and let somebody come in and kill the king. He says, you guys all deserve to die that I was able to sneak in. Yes. I don't know. It's possible. Right. It's sort of like, I don't know, like the special, I would think it was a special cup. You'd go, there's no other cup like it, you know. This is definitely the king's cup, just like Joseph's cup off the table, you know, in Benjamin's bag. All right, well, Lord, we'll come back and look at this some more, Lord willing, next time. You know, kind of losing the point now, but
I don't think this. Just turn it off. We can turn it back on.
I think you're probably right.
Good evening. It's good to see all that are here tonight. I don't think we have any that are visiting with us. And if you'll bear with me, I think the list of those who are sick and gone is going to be longer than my invitation. So give me just a minute. You'll probably know Karen Estes had knee surgery. I think she's in a room now. So we may want to check on them, see if there's anything we can do to help them. She'll have Larry taking care of her, so she may need some help. Is at home now. I think some have already been by to see him, so I know he's back there. I know he definitely appreciates everybody come by to see him and taking him food and that kind of stuff. The Craigs, their air conditioner, I think, went out, so they're kind of scrambling, trying to get that fixed, I think, and trying to find fans and that kind of stuff. Various sick. We want to remember Doug and Carol, especially right now. I know they're both not doing. River is sick, and Matt is home with him. Allison is sick. I think Misty and Scott are working, and Condren. Chris Reese is at school, or gone away from us unless there's anybody. And Harper's sick. It's good to see Kaylee and Christy are here, and we want to also Carolyn. They're getting really close too, and also Travis and Sarah, my brother Travis. If you remember them, they're also. So, if there's anybody else, we can think of anything else mentioned at the end here. Caleb's going to be leading 9. If you want to mark that in your songbooks, we'll sing that here in just a moment, and then Nathan will have our closing prayer. But I just want to tonight ask you a question, and that is, are you perfect? Okay, think about it for a second before you answer it. Are you perfect? Now, I know that for a lot of us, the first reaction is to think, well, no, nobody's perfect. Especially if you're humble-minded, you'll say no, because or maybe very few. Some may say they're perfect, I guess, but very few people say, I'm perfect. We even say things like, when we mess up or we do things wrong, like, or maybe if we leave the toilet seat up, like, sorry, I'm not perfect, passive aggressively. Or we make those excuses a lot of times, but really we're not perfect, right, in a lot of ways. Us as Christians, we know that. We decided to become Christians. We've admitted that we're not perfect, that we've sinned, and we can read things like Romans 3:23 that talks about falling short of the glory of God, and that pretty much eliminates sinless perfection from our life. So we understand we're not perfect. So we get the point, right? Okay, I don't have to keep going on. And the point is not to try to make you feel bad, remind you of how imperfect you are. I'm trying to make here, bring it up, is that I come across a passage in Matthew 5:48 where Jesus says, You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. You can read other passages about going on to perfection and things like that. So sometimes I'll say, hold on a minute, which is it? Are we perfect or not perfect? Or will we never be perfect, but we need to try hard to be perfect? Has Christ given us this impossible task that we can, never reach or obtain? Or is it maybe we need to take a little bit closer look at the word, what it means, this word perfect here, and the true meaning of that word, Matthew 5 and 48. And so when you look at this word, and even in my Bible, it even has a footnote. We see that word perfect. It kind of explains a little better, but the Greek is like teleos. I'm probably not saying that right. But what it means is it means and finished, wanting nothing necessary to completeness. And if you look at a lot of those footnotes, or sometimes they'll have references to other passages that uses the word mature. So we could say it means maturity, right? Christ expects us as Christians to be mature, not spotless, without sin, that we've never done anything wrong, that we're perfect and blameless, but that we are to be mature. And in fact, if you want to turn to Ephesians 4:13 through 16 there, I'd like to read Ephesians 4:13 through 16. It says there in verse 13, until we all attain to the unity of the faith of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves, and carried about by every kind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint that which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. So if we understand the meaning of perfect, this idea of being mature, the way the New Testament kind of uses it, then our question we asked earlier of can we be perfect, then it should be or could be answered yes, right? Or at least that we are pressing towards perfection, that we're pressing towards being more mature. And we shouldn't say, I can never be mature as a Christian, or I can never be perfect, because the Bible teaches us in many other areas of our life that we are to press on to perfection. And so I just wanted to read a few of those really quickly here before we offer the invitation. So one of the first things we should strive for maturity as a Christian or in perfection is in patience. James 1:2 through 3. I'll read through these kind of quickly, so if you don't have time to turn there, I'm sorry. But James 1:2 through 3 says, count it all joy, my brothers, that when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. So in our patience, we should always be trying to mature. I know that's something, having a kid, being married, patience is tested more than probably when you're just on your own. So something you have to constantly work at to try to mature in. And then secondly, how about in our words? Something also, too, that we constantly want to try to strive for perfection in. James 3:2 says, if we stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, it says there, also able to bridle his whole body. We know how much trouble our tongue can get us in with gossip or saying bad words or lying or whatever it may be. So constantly trying to strive for perfection or maturity in the words that we use. Also in love, 1 John 4:17 through 18 says, by this love perfected with us, so that when we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because as he is, so also we are in the world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with the punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. And then fourthly, how about in our understanding? 1 Corinthians 14 and 20 says, brothers, do not be children in your thinking, be infants in evil, but in your thinking be mature. Okay, and then how about spiritual judgment as well? Hebrews 5:14 says, but solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. And then lastly, the one that I really like, I think that gives us some good things to consider, is in our spiritual diligence. Philippians 3:12 through 16. It says, not that I have already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own, because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind, straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Let those of us who are mature think this way. And if anything you think otherwise, God will reveal that also to you. Only let us hold true to what we have attained. So if you want some great advice on how to become mature, the end of verse 13 here when it says that forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. It doesn't mean that we have to pretend like the things in the past haven't happened. We can certainly learn a lot from things that have happened to us in the past, but we can't dwell on those things or we get stuck there in the past. And if you're stuck in the past, as you know, you can never move forward. You can never mature if you're constantly stuck in the past. And the greatest thing that we have to constantly look forward to, as he mentions here, is pressing on toward that goal for the prize, pressing on towards heaven and always remembering that. So therefore, let us go on to perfection, and this we'll do if God permits, as it says in Hebrews 6. So if there's something in your life that maybe you haven't been maturing in and you want to continue to mature in that or work on that, then there's no better time or place than to do it right now, just to make resolve to try to get better in that area. We're all trying to help each other to mature in these areas and to get stronger and to strive on to perfection. If there's any here tonight that might want to respond to the invitation who wish to become a Christian, then we'd ask you to come forward now as we stand and sing.
What can wash away